I think we just got the first Ozone Spyder 4 in the country, and I might just be the first guy to ever fly it. Here's my first impressions. Good morning to people on the internet. My name is Trevor Steele, the founder and instructor at Backcountry PPG, and today we've got the brand new Ozone Spyder 4. I'm super excited about this glider. If you're not familiar with what the Spyder 4 is, it is exactly like the Roadster 4. They are identical. The only major difference between the two is the fabric weight. Roadster 4 is going to be the heavier weight fabric. Spyder 4 is going to be the lighter weight fabric. So, general rule of thumb, if you're wanting easier inflations, the Spyder 4 is going to give you that. Now, I've put a ton of time on the Roadster 4. It has been, honestly, almost my primary wing. I'd say I might be flying it more than I'm flying my Viper XC. And the reason is just I love that freaking glider. The way it soaks up turbulence, the way it launches, the way it lands, just everything about it is super, super fun. I've been digging it, and I'm excited to see how this Spyder 4 compares. The biggest characteristic difference between the two that I need to figure out is how the Spyder 4 handles itself in turbulent conditions. That's going to be the make or break. The Spyder 4, I imagine, is going to launch easier, but I haven't struggled with the Roadster. Even at 8,501 feet, I launched the Roadster, and it was fine. So, unless it like blows me away with how easy it is to launch, then the big difference between the two is going to be how it handles itself in turbulence. Generally, a lighter weight fabric is going to be more dancey, more talkative, because the fabric gets moved around more easily than the heavier weight fabric. Today's video is really just going to be first impressions. I'm going to take it out of the bag. I'm going to do a couple of inflations with it. We're going to look at the fabric, look at the risers. Now, we are going to work on a more conclusive review of the Spyder, which will entail longer flying, more flying. I want to put a handful of hours onto it. I want to actually put it through its paces, but today is a first impressions. Let's go ahead, open it up. Now, I have to be honest with you, yesterday evening, while sitting at the table watching a movie with a girlfriend, tied in a set of Game Changer toggles because I have to have them on a glider for me to want to fly them. You could call me biased, but I think they changed the game. All right. And this is a 26 meter, which has a max weight of 140 kilograms. My all up is about 125 to 130, depending on if I've pooped that day and how well the girlfriend has fed me. So let's take a look here. I'm expecting like a super light fabric, and it is exactly that. This is actually my first time touching it. We'll give it a little rub test. Feels nice and thin. Ooh, let me get the Roadster real quick. All right, fabric feel. I do notice this one feels really light. Not that the Roadster feels heavy, but there is definitely going to be a weight difference. Let's see, I'll pull up the data. The Spyder 26 weighs 4.75 kilograms or 10.4 pounds. The Roadster 4 26 meter weighs 5.71 kg or 12.5 pounds. So roughly a 2-pound weight difference between the Spyder and between the Roadster. That's a fair amount. I mean, that's 20% weight savings between one to the other, roughly, given that that's 10 and that's 12. That's actually a pretty big difference between the two. Sheath lines, of course. Sheath all the way up, it appears. And big change between the Spyder 3 and Spyder 4 is this right here, which is the winglet. Okay, so let's spread her open, see what she kind of looks like. I definitely can feel the weight difference. It is thin material, which is to be expected. It's one of those kind of trade-off things. You get super lightweight material, you get easier inflations. Technically speaking, I believe lighter material rolls better, is slightly more efficient, glides better. I don't remember where I heard that, but I believe that's the case. Let's take a look here at the risers. So first thing I notice is they changed trim buckles. These are the trim buckles they put on the new Roadster 4, which I'm a big fan of. The biggest change between what they did on these trim buckles and previous models is that instead of just routing the fabric through and out the buckle, they actually routed it through and then back through the buckle. So there's this little circle in the middle right here that makes this pull firmer, which, yes, when you go to pull the trims, it is harder. It does take more effort to get the trims to pull, but when you're flying, what's really nice about these trim buckles is you push the button and it doesn't go anywhere, versus like pushing the button, it pops out. and then you just slide your hand up with the buckle to where you want it to be. Anyways, neutral line is, should look at this. Neutral line is this thicker kind of arrow right here. Now I'm probably gonna put this where I put the Roadster. The Roadster, I would take this magnet, stick it just below the other magnet, like so, and then pull that tight, and that was my neutral line right there. Now, you may consider trimming this just past neutral. You may consider this trimming just in from neutral. If you trim it down a little bit more, it's gonna be less prone to overflying you. If you trim it out a little bit more, it's gonna be more prone to overflying, but easier to inflate. Trims in, harder to inflate, less prone to overflying. I found on the Roadster that people were struggling to keep it from overflying them. So I actually would trim it just past neutral, where the arrow was just below the buckle. And some dudes found that a little bit easier because they were having a hard time catching the surge. It's not where I would launch it, but some dudes had that preference. Overall, I think the risers are the exact same as previous wings. I don't think I see any difference between the Spyder 3 risers and the Spyder 4 besides the trims. Now I did go ahead already and tie the toggles in, and I tied tip steering in. For those of you wondering what I did on lengths, I took 4 inches out of the tip steering and I left the brake lengths stock, which is exactly what I did on the Roadster. And these are the V1 toggles. Okay, well, I'm gonna grab a harness. I'm gonna do a quick inflation with it. I'm gonna see kind of what that feels like. I'm gonna try to inflate with as little effort as humanly possible, which is something we do with all our students, where I try to teach them the least amount of physical effort you can do and then build up from there, because it kind of gives you a good understanding of how little effort it actually takes to inflate a wing. All right, let's see if it works. Well, that worked. How much wind would you say we have, Colton? Because I would say we have almost no wind. That was pretty impressive, I'll give it that. Mike, how much wind did you say we have here?
I'm gonna say you got about maybe 2 miles an hour, maybe 1.
I'm gonna go 1 to 2 mile an hour here, dude. There ain't nothing.
What? That's some kind of weird mojo magic.
Impressive, dude.
What you see?
That was pretty impressive. Let me grab the Roadster and do an inflation with the Roadster to see how it compares in the same conditions, walking the same speed. All right, just so all of you know, I'm gonna put the trims in the exact same spot. Let's go see how it compares. Wind is the same direction, same speed. Let's see if I can get it laid out while I still have these conditions. I can feel the weight, man, my poor little weak arm. I gotta hit the gym. Same toggles, same brake lengths, same tip lengths, same speed, same wind. Let's do it. All right. That didn't work. Let's try one more time. Okay, it did work. Did work. I noticed it was more inclined to wanting to stall on that. I pushed the A's a little harder and got it up. Well, that one didn't work. Okay. So I am seeing a difference here between the two. The Roadster, still easy to launch, not hard by any means, even at altitude. We're at 5,000 even where I'm standing. But that Spyder, dude, and it wants to float up above your head, which is just like the Spyder 3. I mean, that was kind of one of the best parts about it. The big question that I wanted to answer is law of diminishing returns. At what point is it enough, right? And this Roadster has been plenty easy, even for new pilots to launch, even in light winds, even in variable winds. I haven't struggled. I haven't seen anybody struggle, but I did see the difference. Didn't you? That Spyder was impressive. So I guess now it's time to fly. guys, I just finished flying the Spyder 4. One thing to keep in mind is all of this information is based on 16 minutes of flight time. But do also keep in mind that the Spyder 4 and Roadster 4 are identical gliders. The only difference between one and the other is the fabric. So really all we're testing to see between one and the other is how does the different fabric make it fly? Starting with launches, obviously the inflation is going to be easier. We saw that earlier when comparing apples to apples with the inflation, and that seems to be true. It didn't try to overfly me, still had a nice brake range, created lift easily, took off, climbed out. Everything between the Roadster and the Spyder there seemed nearly identical. Once airborne, the brake lengths and tip lengths felt the exact same as the Roadster. Again, I kept the brakes, the stock length, and I shortened tips 4 inches, and they felt identical, which means that they're coming the same, and I was getting the same kind of feedback. Off the bat, the brake feel felt equally as firm or light as it did of the Roadster. I really can't say I noticed anything. At trims neutral, it's a little firmer than it is at trims in. Trims all the way in is actually my favorite spot to fly the Roadster and the Spyder now, because I like the softer brake range, partly because I tend to fly that glider in rougher conditions because I like how it feels in the rougher conditions. Moving forward from that, let's talk about the juicy stuff. When I went up there, I wanted to test a handful of things. First thing I wanted to test, enter into a spiral, does it self-exit? Yes, it does. Now, I didn't enter into a super intense spiral. I could have entered into a little bit of a deeper one. I should have, I meant to, I just didn't get back to it. But it did exit the spiral, which is a big thing for me with the beginner glider. Last thing you want is to enter into a spiral and it sticks in the spiral, which some gliders, especially advanced gliders, do that. That's the last thing you want with a new guy. You want a new guy to be able to let go and it literally auto-corrects. Next thing is oscillation. Now, I got the wing rocking back and forth. I did absolutely nothing, and I wanted to see how long would it take for it to correct the oscillation. And what I did conclude is it still slightly oscillates. The winglets are on there to help dampen the oscillation. I would say they do not remove oscillation. There is still roll. When you induce an oscillation, rock back and forth and let go, it still rocks back and forth, but it does slowly catch itself and will straighten out. It just took a minute for it to do so. Next thing that I wanted to see was how does it wing over and how does it carry energy? It is a playful glider. A lot of people think that you can't barrel roll a Spyder or beginner wing, and that is not the case. Spyder and Roadsters are beautiful gliders to learn energy on. Wingovers, barrel rolls, they do beautifully. It flew nice. As soon as you get energy building, as long as you've got good energy management, it wants to keep going. It will eat the energy up for you if you're not prepared to handle it. So if you don't know what you're doing, it will kind of hit the brakes for you, which is a thing of beginner gliders and is what you want of beginner gliders. As you progress from a beginner to a more advanced glider, the beginner gliders soak up the energy, the advanced gliders provide the energy. And that's exactly what the Spyder did. But it still has barrel roll, wing over capabilities. The instant roll rate isn't like crazy, which is great. It's a beginner wing. Last thing you want is for someone to grab some tip steer and it just like wingtip to the horizon. You got to get it moving. Once you get the inertia going, it loves to keep going and it wants to go with you, but it doesn't just like bam, wingtip to the ground. After that, on one of my wingovers, I exited vertically and shot the glider really hard forward. I was at trims neutral for this, went hands up and I let the glider actually give out, and it did. It kissed 3 o'clock, which is the horizon, and it frontaled, and then it popped, and we flew away. And I probably grabbed some brakes to assist it, but it did just pop out and fly away. And the reason that's an important thing for me to test and something I like to do is I want a beginner person who's learning how to do wingovers to be able to screw up terribly and be okay. And that's one of the things that they'll screw up. They exit energy way too hard. They don't know exact timing or where to put it. They shoot it forward and it frontals and it pops out and they fly away. And that's what you're shooting for. Now, after that, I intentionally tried to do that several more times and I actually did not successfully get it to collapse again. I just didn't go hard enough, but I was able to get it right to 3 and it would tickle and it would stay open, which is also lovely. That is somewhat of a characteristic of reflex gliders. They are more resistant to frontaling. You get them shooting forward and they're less prone to frontaling than a classic profile. Moving on from that, I did a handful of collapse tests. One of the first collapse tests I did was just an asymmetric and I released immediately, grab it, yank it, it gives out, pops out. I did that with brakes in my hand, without brakes in my hand, where I actually twisted the wrist down pretty hard and it just pops right back out and keeps going. Now, if you grab and hold and apply 0 outside brake pressure, it does enter into a turn. As soon as you release that A, regardless of doing anything else, it pops open and straightens out whichever direction it was facing. If you grab and hold an asymmetric collapse and apply a slight amount of weight shift or a slight amount of brake, it does just go in a straight line, which is lovely. So with the turning characteristic, in some way every glider does that, even beginner gliders, even the almighty Dominator, which I try never to talk about. I've taken collapses on that where it shoots you off in the other direction. Here's the thing, if you've got a glider and half of this glider collapses, this is acting as a giant piece of drag. And the flying side is not only going faster than said collapse side, but this drag side is slowing it down and turning it towards the collapse side. And actually what you would like is 1, that the collapse starts at the wingtips and work their way in, and 2, it actually goes the direction it's collapsed, not the other way. The Ozone Kona 3, which I also love, if you take an asymmetric, it actually goes away from the collapse, which is what I would refer to as not uncontrollable, but slightly unpredictable. I want it to actually go to the collapse side because I know which side is collapsed and not based on brake pressure, and I can hold myself to the non-collapse side. And then as soon as it opens, it just pops and flies away, which is beautiful. Now, full frontals. Let me tell you this, there's a lot of pressure on those A's. In order to get this glider collapsed, dude, you gotta yank hard. And I pulled those full frontals, held them. It did want to tuck in the center and bring wingtips together. It didn't want to just tuck and fold. I probably was pulling slightly inward. I could have pulled differently. I didn't do like a crazy ton of them because my arms got exhausted. I did do the gym yesterday, so my shoulders were a little sore. I've just been complaining about muscles this whole video. Anyways, so yeah, it would tuck and you would bring those wingtips together, but releasing, regardless of if you apply brakes or not, it would actually pop and straighten out. Few things with a full frontal that I want to pay attention to. Altitude loss. I didn't notice much of an altitude loss. Sometimes you take a collapse and you're literally just dropping out of the sky. I wasn't. Direction change. In the full frontal, I wasn't changing direction. What you don't want is it to frontal and spin and open and shoot the opposite direction. That is no good, and it didn't do that. And then, did I need to apply any inputs to recover the collapse? Some reflex profiles, especially intense ones, once you take a collapse, they stick, and you actually have to pump brakes to pop it out. I want to know if it collapses and I get blacked out from my hand smacking my face, unlikely. But let's say, is it going to pop back open and fly away? And it does. Even with the wingtips coming together, it pops and flies away. Now, I would prefer a frontal collapse to start at the tips and work their way to the center, not start at the center and work their way to the tips. The tips wanted to fly more than the center wanted to fly, which is not my favorite characteristic. This was all trims in. I would prefer that the tips don't want to fly and the center wants to fly. But tips are controllable just as much as the center is controllable. So overall, satisfied with that. The last thing that was a big deciding factor between the Roadster and the Spyder was how it felt in turbulence. Unfortunately, there was no turbulence in the sky for me to test that in. I couldn't even really feel the tickle of my own wake, which is a good thing. I do think they turned the reflex profile up on the Spyder and the Roadster. They do not feel as soft as the version 3. Now, nobody at Ozone has confirmed this for me, but when you look at the side profile of these gliders, it appears as if the reflex profile is more intense than previous models of Ozone wings, and even of Viper's Sirocco's. I will go as far as saying it, the Roadster is the most comfortable wing for me in turbulence. Like if I'm gonna be in turbulence, that's the glider I wanna be there in. Out of every other glider I've flown, including the almighty Dominator. And including my Viper XC, which is part of the reason why I've been flying the Roadster so much, is because I find myself nowadays flying in turbulent conditions all the time, by choice, in the middle of the day. And when I'm gonna go midday flying, I'm taking that Roadster instead of taking that Viper XC. Not because the Viper XC won't do it, but because the Roadster just does it so dang well, and it's so nice, and I'm not really in that flight for roll rate or speed. I'm in that flight for just cruising around. Talking about speed, I did some numbers here, guys. I did test speed roughly. We had a little bit of wind, so we have to do a little bit of math, but I saw first an increase from trims in to trims neutral being a 2 mile an hour change, and from trims neutral to trims out being a 4 mile an hour change. So going from trims in to neutral, you get 2 miles an hour more speed. From neutral to out, you get 4 for a total of 6 miles an hour of acceleration in your trims. That's not crazy. I did not push speed bar, but a 6 mile an hour speed change within the trims, I mean, it's a beginner wing. It's much better than like the little tiny trims that come on a Kona, a Moxie, and a Mojo. The thing that Ozone does do that I really like is that they keep the brakes available all through the trim range. You can pull brakes at any point in your trim range without having to worry about a collapse. And I like that. If you make the trim long enough, you reach the point in which you've accelerated the glider enough that you cannot pull brakes without inducing a collapse. And I'm glad that they do not put that point in the trim range. They put that point in the speed bar. I would bet you get another 6 to 8 miles an hour out of the speed bar. I will test that in our all-inclusive review. But that is kind of sort of what I'm seeing. And I'll be honest, that matches the Roadster almost identically. And I think the general consensus of this first impressions video is that the Roadster and the Spyder are basically the same, as they are the same. And the only real big difference between the two is the launching characteristics. The inflation is easier on a Spyder than it is on a Roadster. Now, who would I pick that for, and why would I go with one over the other? Honestly speaking, I feel like if I was going to reach for a wing and I was going to launch right here, I was going to launch at 8,000 feet in a rough environment, I probably would find myself reaching for that Spyder. It does make those light wind inflations easier, but that doesn't mean I don't mind launching the Roadster. It still launches easy. It's a hard choice between the two, and I'm going to give myself a little bit more time to see which one I honestly find myself reaching for between the two. I'm going to hang on to this Spyder 26 as mine. I'm going to hang on to that Roadster 26 as mine. I'm going to try to fly them both back to back as much as I can, see which one I truly find myself grabbing between the two more than the other. Cool, guys. Well, that's a wrap for this video. Again, we're going to do a full review as I put a little bit more time on this. Hopefully about 2 weeks from now, 1 to 2 weeks, I'm going to try and fly it as much as I can and give you that back-to-back comparison between the Roadster and the Spyder. If you're a brand new pilot looking to get into paramotoring, we do offer a 10-day beginner training course. If you're already a pilot looking to improve your skills and join us on some adventure flying, join our adventure training. For information on both of those courses, visit backcountryppg.com. We've also got a slew of Ozone glider inventory as we are a direct importer with Ozone. I've got Viper XCs, Roadsters, and now Spyders in stock, ready to ship. Again, visit Backcountry PPG for information on those. And with all of that being said, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.